mode, simply press Escape key to access the Q&A and chat box. Now, let's dive into our session and start exploring the future of sustainable and reliable energy distribution with Blue GIS. The stage is yours, Kartik.
Thank you, Miriam, for this introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone out there. To start with challenges, I think we all know that one big and imminent challenge we have is the climate change. All the natural catastrophes we are seeing nowadays are one way or other linked to this climate change. The global energy systems are one of the largest sources of the greenhouse gas emissions. And these power grids are going to grow rapidly to address the increase in energy demand, urbanization, aging infrastructure, and increase in renewables and distributed energy resources. What does it mean? This means there will be increased pressure on grid stability. Any infrastructure that is not state-of-the-art or latest will be exposed due to different loads and grid dynamics. So, our mission is clear. We should all use the products with low CO2 emissions that are compact and designed with circular economy in mind and with many digital features that will help the grids become more stable. Together with state-of-the-art sustainable and digital technologies, we should modernize the aging infrastructure, which will further increase the efficiency of our grids. And it's not just manufacturers like us and the customers like you are focusing on these topics. Some of the regulatory boards are also changing the regulations to address these challenges. And one such regulatory change we have recently in Europe is the F-gas regulation. And for this, I would like to invite my colleague Miriam, who is an expert in this topic, and she will give a brief overview about this regulation and its impact on the electrical equipment. Miriam?
Thank you, Kartik. One of the first global agreements to protect the environment was already signed in 1987 with the Montreal Protocol. Since then, the focus shifted from ozone depletion towards CO2 emissions. I would like to take you on a journey through the history and development of the European Union's F-gas regulation. The regulation emerged as a groundbreaking measure under the European Union's initiative for environmental conservation, directly contributing to the objectives of the EU Green Deal. The regulation was designed to control and reduce the emission of fluorinated gases, which are potent greenhouse gases and thereby address their significant impact on the global climate. This action set a precedent for comprehensive environmental policies. The story begins in 2006 when the European Union adopted its first F-gas regulation. This initial regulation was primarily focused on preventing the leakage of F-gases during the use and end-of-life phases of stationary equipment. Hydrofluorocarbons are a type of fluorinated greenhouse gas used in various applications, such as refrigerations, air conditioning, and aerosols. These gases have a global warming potential thousands of times higher than carbon dioxide. The use of SF6 for tires and magnesium casting was prohibited. Recognizing the need for more stringent measures, the European Union introduced a revised F-gas regulation in 2014. This updated regulation broadened the scope and introduced a phase-down of high global warming potential refrigerants. The goal was to reduce the supply of hydrofluorocarbons to the EU market, aiming for a significant reduction of F-gases emissions. At this stage, switchgears were already part of the discussion. That's why Siemens initiated the development of F-gas-free switchgear. In response to the European climate law and the need for a stronger climate action, the European Commission reviewed in 2014 the F-gas regulation. On April 7, 2022, a new proposal was presented to the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. This proposal aimed to further reduce F-gas emission, aligning EU legislation with the Montreal Protocol and contributing to the EU targets of a 55% net greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030 and climate neutrality by 2050. The new F-gas regulation came effective on March of this year. It introduced several key measures, including a steeper reduction in the amounts of HFCs that importers and producers may place on the European market, with a complete phase-out by 2050. The ban of F-gases in switchgear, heat pumps and HVAC systems is now regulated within the European Union. In the coming slides, I will focus on the two chapters, Containment and Restriction of Switchgears. These articles are not only concerned with restriction on placing a switchgear on the market, but also with how their usage is restricted to protect our environment. Recovery and destruction, certification and training are aspects you do not have to consider using a blue GIS switchgear because it's F-gas free. The timeline follows a structured approach and distinguishes between two switchgear ratings. For ratings less or equal to 24 kV, the F-gas regulation takes effect on January 1st, 2026. For ratings greater than 24 kV, the effective date is January 1st, 2030. What is important to know is that the putting into operation date is relevant, not the purchase date nor the delivery date. For equipment above 24 kV, the regulation sets a later compliance date, acknowledging the technical challenges and the need for development of suitable alternatives. This phased approach underscores the EU's commitment to balance environmental objectives with practical industry capabilities, ensuring a gradual but firm transition to greener alternatives across all voltage ratings. The regulation defines several essential conditions in terms of the availability of alternatives from manufacturers and the diversity of offers in the market. Firstly, there must be a sufficient number of manufacturers that have developed and are offering F-gas-free switchgear options, ensuring competitive choices for consumers. If these conditions are not met, the following procurement cascade can be applied. Starting from January 2026, a 24 kV switchgear must be F-gas-free, unless only one offer from one manufacturer of F-gas-free equipment has been submitted. In that case, a new tender can be issued and a GWP smaller 1000 is allowed. If only one or no offer is received, then a third tender with GWP above 1000 is permitted. In case of an offer cascade, informing the national authority is necessary. There might be a public interest to publish end customer names on such an exception list. But already today you can order our Blue GIS switchgear and avoid this time-consuming order processes. Okay, let's shortly talk about maintenance. Starting on January 1st, 2035, virgin SF6 usage for maintenance or servicing electrical switchgear is banned unless reclaimed or recycled, and a documentation is required. Valid from 1st of January 2025, switchgear using F-gases need to be labeled. Okay, looking at the world map, F-gas-free switchgears are a global concern, exceeding far beyond the European Union. In the United States, states such as New York, Maine and California are either planning or have already implemented regulations. California was the first with a ban of SF6 and Maine 1 year later with a ban of PFAS. Some F-gases fall under this so-called forever chemical ban too. Countries in the Middle East like the UAE and Saudi Arabia are also developing regulation for F-gases listed in Annex 1 of the F-gas regulation for insulated switchgear. Australia and New Zealand have committed to eliminating SF6 under the Montreal Protocol. Clearly, the movement towards F-gas-free switchgear is gaining momentum worldwide. I hope you got a brief idea about F-gas regulation. Now I will hand over back to Kartik, who will talk about Blue GIS.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for such a nice introduction and explanation about F-gas regulation. So, before I was talking about the challenges, now to summarize the challenges in 3 keywords, we have decarbonization, decentralization, and digitalization. And this is being driven, as I mentioned, about a lot of factors. So, that means the future of the power distribution must be digital and sustainable with the products that are more environmentally friendly and are ready for digitalization and automation. On one side, digitalization will help the grids become more robust and offer the users have the ability to monitor their assets, like they can monitor the health performance and also perform the predictive maintenance. And on the other side, sustainable technologies will enable the users to reach their net zero targets by preserving resources and reducing CO2 emissions. And our GIS is also part of our big degree framework from Siemens, especially in reaching the decarbonization and resource efficiency targets. So, our response as a GIS manufacturers to these key requirements is Blue GIS with clean air as an insulating medium. In this webinar, I will focus more on the sustainability aspects of a Blue GIS and how this switchgear is an essential part of our ecosystem of sustainability-related topics. The digitalization part will be discussed in detail in our second part of our webinar. So, as an overview, our Blue GIS is the combination of clean air as an insulating medium, vacuum interrupter for interruption of the currents, and with all the features of a traditional gas-insulated switchgear. And I think you might have already know or read in the internet, the clean air what we use is made up of natural origin gases with global warming potential less than 1. It contains no F-gases, making it very safe to operate, which enables easy handling during the lifetime of the switchgear. And this insulating medium also have no regulatory restrictions and no documentation or reporting is required for this gas. Our vacuum technology, on the other hand, is based on 40 years of rich experience and innovation. It is used in our Blue GIS for circuit breaker applications and also for load break switching. And I think you will learn more about the load break switching in the second webinar. They are also used in the medium voltage GIS up to 40 kA and up to 3150 amperes. And vacuum interrupters are proved to have very high mean time to failure, and they are suitable for many possible applications in the medium voltage networks. And as I mentioned earlier, the Blue GIS offer all the proven benefits of a classical gas-insulated switchgear, like compactness, high reliability, maintenance-free design, and also low life cycle costs. And if you see, today, many of our customers are already started benefiting from Blue GIS by saving almost 2.5 tons of CO2 footprint during its lifetime when compared to a classical gas-insulated switchgear made of SF6. This means you get all the benefits of a classical GIS, but still get to save a lot of CO2 emissions. That, in my opinion, is amazing what we are doing here. And now, I want to talk about the transparency of the sustainability aspects of our switchgear. Because today, there are many products out there that are claiming to be sustainable, but unfortunately, there is very less transparency to such claims. And this is why, at Siemens, we have created a label called Siemens Ecotech label, with a key focus on transparency of the claims that are made. In order to achieve this Siemens Ecotech label, the product must be having at least Type 2 EPD, short for Environmental Product Declaration, and should be manufactured in sustainable factories, and the product must fulfill at least one of these features in each category during the entire life cycle of the product. And these categories are split between 3 stages of product life cycle. The sustainable materials represents manufacturing stage, The optimal use represents the use stage, and the value recovery and circularity represents the end-of-life stage. And based on these individual features that the product fulfill, an ecotech profile is created. In this slide, you will see such a profile for one of our blue GIS types, DAB24. And here, in this profile, you can see the features this switchgear has fulfilled in order to achieve this label. It's like low carbon materials, sustainable packaging, high recycling, and so on, all listed in this particular profile. And I'm happy and glad to say that all our blue GIS products have secured this ecotech label. And with this, we believe this kind of transparency will support and enable our customers to make their sustainable choices. Now, I will talk a little bit about the environmental product declarations, which are the heart of the transparency that is achieved in the ecotech labels. But first, to give you a brief introduction, there are two types of EPD, that is type 2 and type 3. One of the major differences between these two types are whether it is verified and certified by a third party or not, and also for type 2 EPD, it is not mandatory to perform a life cycle assessment. However, the Siemens type 2 EPDs are based on life cycle assessment. This ensures the credibility of our environmental product declarations, even though they are type 2. In this slide, you can see how such a document would look like. Like if you get an EPD, this is how it's going to look like. You will learn about the product in this EPD, about the product for what this EPD is made for, and you will learn about different life cycle stages and possible scenarios that is assumed in the life cycle analysis. And you will also learn in this document about the tool that is used to perform the LCA. And also you will see the summary of the key performance indicators like global warming potential, resource usage, water usage, human toxicity, and so on. All this information you will find in such an EPD document. And here I would like to emphasize a little bit more about CO2 footprint. So in one of the pages, you will find also a summary of CO2 equivalent values of the switchgear during the 3 stages of life cycle, like during manufacturing, during operation, and during end of life. And here I wanted to show a classical difference between a blue GIS and SF6 GIS, and you see how much of a CO2 footprint can be saved when you compare the values of a typical blue GIS to a similar SF6 GIS. And as you see, you can save almost up to 50%. Now, as a customer, you might be wondering how you can use these CO2 equivalent savings from blue GIS in your CO2 reporting. So this is actually a very important question we get always. So first of all, I believe you all know what a greenhouse gas protocol is. For those who have not heard of it, the greenhouse gas protocol is an initiative for a global standardization of the emission of greenhouse gases that corporate entities like us or like you as a consumers should measure, quantify, and report their own emission levels. And this will help us to be able to manage the global emissions. And if you see out there, today more than 9 out of top 10 Fortune 500 companies use this greenhouse gas protocol to report their carbon emissions. Now, according to this protocol, the emissions are split into 3 scopes. It's scope 1 emissions, scope 2 emissions, and scope 3, which is even subcategorized into scope 3 upstream or scope 3 downstream emissions. I know I must be confusing you all with a lot of information, so we have prepared a nice animation to explain you these scopes. I hope you have now at least some basic idea how each of these scopes is being defined. Now, coming back to our CO2 equivalent page in the EPD, and now based on the video we have just seen, and I would like to put first an example of an SF6 GIS. The manufacturing emissions that are coming from the switchgear are reported as Scope 3 upstream emissions for our customers. The joule losses related to the operational CO2 emissions are reported depending on the type of the energy source used by our consumer. And the SF6 leakage CO2 equivalent will fall under the Scope 1 emissions of our customers. And the end of life will come under the Scope 3 upstream. Now, if you consider the same picture with the blue GIS, they will first drastically reduce their Scope 1 emissions by eliminating the SF6 gas. In addition, if they use a renewable energy to operate the switchgear, then the major contribution of the CO2 emissions of the switchgear during the lifetime, which is actually the use phase, can be eliminated. And this is how an EPD can give you a good overview of the possible emissions of a product and enable our customers to make the sustainable choices. In summary, our customers can reduce or achieve zero emissions by using carbon neutral energy sources or by not using SF6 products, and also by using the products with highly recyclable materials. So now I would like to talk very briefly about our new state-of-the-art IoT platform called Electrification X. I will not go too much in detail about this topic as there were many webinars held on this topic. However, I would like to show one of the features in this platform that that will further enable our customers in terms of sustainable choices. This is called the energy management feature. And this feature is available for you as a dashboard with a lot of information that will provide an overview about the energy consumption related to carbon emissions, and also based on the assets information, this dashboard will also categorize the emissions into scopes. This means if you have a blue GIS along with this Electrification X platform, you will have more control over your emissions and you see where to reduce or where to change in order to reach your targets. And in my last slide, I would like to talk to you about our recycling services. Our colleagues from the customer service have created a detailed recycling guide for our switchgear, which will ensure a high recyclability of the product at the end of life. Almost all our blue GIS has a very high recyclability rate of almost around 90%. This means we can further preserve the resources and then improve the carbon footprint. And with this, we are closing the loop of the circular economy, which I have discussed in the very beginning. So, I hope you've learned a great share of information about our blue GIS and how it can contribute to reach your sustainability targets. And me and Miriam are right now ready to answer your questions. And after our questions, stay tuned for the second webinar to learn about the digital aspect of our blue GIS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kartik. That was a lot of information.
I hope it's not confusing, but I tried my best to explain in a simpler way.
So let's have a look at the questions we received. There's one about EPDs. I will read it out. You have talked about type 2 EPDs and type 3 EPDs. What more value will we get with type 3 EPDs for Siemens products, Kartik?
Okay, so it's a good question. I did mention before the Siemens type 2 EPD and type 3 EPD. First of all, at Siemens, all our type 2 EPDs also include a life cycle analysis. Normally, a type 2 EPD does not require a type 2 life cycle assessment or life cycle analysis, but we in the Siemens, all our type 2 EPDs does include life cycle analysis. This means the only benefit from having a Type 3 EPD from Siemens here is, sure, it is a third-party certified and verified EPD. So if you have confidence on our processes, I would say Type 2 EPD is more or less sufficient, because at the end of the day, the CO2 values from our Type 2 and Type 3 EPD will not change. It's just you have a third-party certification adding along to the EPD document. So.
Okay, thank you, Kartik, for the question, or for the answer to that question. There's a second one in regards of EPD. Can we create an EPD for customer-specific switchgear, Kartik?
Yes, sure. Yeah, we can create a customer-specific EPD. I mean, it's not impossible. It's going to be taking more time and more resources. I'll explain you why. The EPDs, what we have today is we perform the EPD for a homogeneous product family. That means we select one product for the whole family and one configuration that could fit pretty much the product family, and then we perform the life cycle assessment. And now, when you want to have a customer-specific EPD, we need to consider the low voltage compartment, which I think it's pretty much the customer-dependent product or a part of the switchgear. And these all are the things we need to consider in our calculation, and then we can perform an EPD. So the short answer is yes, we can perform the customer-specific EPDs. The only thing is it will take more time and resources, and you have to judge if it is a more value or not, or you can go with this Type 2 EPD with the homogeneous product family to give you an indication what kind of CO2 footprint that can come from this product.
Okay. EPD seems to be an important topic nowadays. There's a third one on EPD.
Okay.
I read it out. Is there a way to use the CO2 values from EPD to get a monetary benefit? Oh, that's an interesting question. Kartik.
Wow, that's okay. So imagine you are a consumer or you're a customer. You can use this EPDs to report your CO2 footprints as accurate as possible. So, I mean, sure, if you use an SF6 GIS to Blue GIS, you can see how much CO2 savings you can have. And if we can put a monetary value on the CO2 savings directly, I do not know. But overall, it's going to improve your company's image. For example, okay, you report lower CO2 footprint by using SF6 free switchgear, which means it will improve your company's image, which I think also get a good name from your investors. So there is an indirect, definitely a benefit for you. But I can't put an euro value or dollar value on this monetary benefit, but I see there is definitely some benefit for the customers with EPDs and CO2 emission reporting.
Okay, and to make good decision, you need a clear view of your data. So
yes,
I think it's always good to know.
Exactly. And I think this is also one question. Many companies are now promoting their F-gas-free switchgear portfolio, or your Blue GIS switchgears are already orderable. Maybe you can answer it.
Yeah, okay. Yes, of course. All of our Blue GIS products that we are showing on our webpage are available. With some of them a serial production and some of them in pilot stages. Just contact us. We will make things possible.
Yes. So,
do you want me to read that one out?
Yeah, you can read the question.
Okay. Since the Blue GIS uses clean air as insulating medium, can we call them air insulated switchgear? Okay,
yeah, that's a logical question. Okay, short answer is no. Sure, we are using clean air as an insulating medium, but the switchgear cannot be called as an air insulated switchgear. I mean, you will not believe this is a very often question we also get some from the customers. You're using clean air. Can we tell it as an air insulated switchgear? Unfortunately not. I'll tell you the reason why. Because we are not using clean air as just as an air. We are using under an enclosure with an increased pressure. And this is pretty much like your typical gas insulated switchgear. So we are just replacing the SF6 with clean air. Because if it is an air insulated switchgear, you will not get such a compact solution as you're getting with our blue GIS with clean air. Because if you see for a typical 36 kV rated switchgear, I think our widths are around 600 millimeters. This you will not get it in an air insulated switchgear. And also the blue GIS is hermetically sealed, and you will not have any influence of the environment, which is also not the case in air insulated switchgear. Sure, they both have their different range of applications and use cases, but just because we are using clean air as an insulating medium, we cannot call the GIS as an air insulated switchgear.
So, making a long answer short, we stick to the benefits of GIS, and it's just a...
It's still GIS, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, there is another question.
Are there any standards for a new SF6 alternative gases?
Oh yeah, yes. So, today we have two standards, one already published and one is under the draft stage. So we have IEC 62271-4, which is the family of this IEC 62271 standard. So this -4 standards talk about the user guide for the SF6 free alternatives. However, in this standard, all the SF6 free alternatives that we are discussing today or available in the market are mentioned as an informative. So they are not directly considered as a normative, so they are mentioned under annexes. Whereas we have another standard, which is currently under the draft stage, and I think pretty soon it's going to be published. It is IEC 63360. This is what they call it as a technical grade of SF6 free alternatives. And in this standard, you will find more detailed normative recommendations of the gas that's supposed to be called as an SF6 free alternatives. I think these two standards will give you a good overview of these gases. So I'll read this question.
Okay.
Since the F-gas regulation is effective in 2026, why should I buy a blue GIS now?
Oh, did you watch our presentation? Well, as you've seen in our webinar, you can save a good amount of CO2 emissions if you buy a blue GIS from today. You don't have to wait for the effectiveness of the regulation, because I believe you have your own sustainability targets set in place today. Do not wait. There's no reason to. I
mean, if the technology is already ready, it's mature enough that we are providing as a serial production, I don't think you need to doubt or worry anything. You can just take the switchgear because it's the same compactness, same footprint. You pretty much put in the same place where you actually planned also for SF6. You can use the same switchgear here. So yeah, I would say don't wait.
Yeah, don't wait. Ecotech label. Oh, I read that one out. Yeah. Is the Ecotech label Siemens wide applied or only applicable for dedicated products, Kartik?
Yeah, okay. The Siemens Ecotech label is actually, as the name says, it's for the complete Siemens applicable. So pretty much all the products that are in the wide range of Siemens that are available are getting this or can try to get this Ecotech label. What I meant by can try, because it's not easy. I mean, there's a huge process. There's a huge big steering committee that will check all the claims from each product that want to have the Ecotech label. And they will be scrutinized. And trust me, it was not an easy part for us to get our blue GIS to get this label, even though it does not have any SF6. So there were very strict scrutinization before you get this Siemens Ecotech label. So the answer is yes, it is applicable for the whole Siemens portfolio products, but only certain products are now eligible to get this Ecotech label. Okay, interesting question. Nice questions.
Yeah, thank you for participating and putting your questions into the chat box. But now we have reached the end of the session. Well, I see there are still unanswered questions. Do not worry, we will answer them via email. Additionally, if any more questions come to your mind, please do not hesitate to contact us.
Yeah.
And one last remark, in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you will find the slides available for download. Remember, if you're in full screen mode and you cannot see the download area, you may need to press Escape. Access to the recordings of today's webinar will be automatically available to all participants directly after the session. You can use the same link that was provided for the live webinar to access it. And please stay tuned for a second part of the webinar presented by Leila and Bernd. So until then, stay safe and sound, take care, and
say goodbye. I hope you learned something. So we're looking forward for any of your questions you have, and enjoy the day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.